One thing I've learned after years of working with families is this. When a home feels disorganized, it creates stress for everyone. And often, that stress falls on one parent trying to keep everything running. That's why I want to tell you about Cozilla, who is sponsoring today's episode. Their Cozilla Calendar Plus 2 is designed to simplify family life in a really thoughtful way. It's a beautiful touchscreen display that acts as a central command center for your home. You can see everyone's schedules, manage tasks, plan meals, and set routines all in one place. And because it syncs automatically with your existing calendars, it updates in real time without extra effort. What stands out to me is how it supports kids, too. There's a built-in reward system that encourages them to take ownership of their responsibilities, which is so important for building confidence and independence. It's also incredibly helpful for families who benefit from clear routines and structure. It just makes daily life feel more manageable. And I appreciate that there are no subscription fees, just a simple tool that works for your family. Go to Cozilla.com and use code Dr. Meg to get $30 off your first order. That's COZYLA.com, code DRMEG to get $30 off your first order. There are certain moments as a parent that just stop you in your tracks, especially when your baby is struggling to breathe comfortably. And one of the most common issues I see with little ones is nasal congestion. It affects their sleep, their feeding, and honestly, it can be really stressful for parents. That's why I want to tell you about Boogie Buster. Boogie Buster is a baby nasal aspirator that was created by parents who went through a really scary experience when nothing else worked for their child, and they were determined to come up with something better. What makes this different is that it's both powerful and gentle. It's designed to actually clear congestion effectively without being harsh or uncomfortable for your baby. And this isn't just anecdotal. Hundreds of families tested it, and it received incredibly strong feedback for being safe, easy to use, and effective. More and more pediatricians are recommending using a nasal aspirator regularly before feeds and sleep, because when babies can breathe better, everything else improves too. Now, for a limited time, you can get 25% off baby nasal aspirators at boogiebuster.com. Plus, Parenting Great Kids listeners get an additional 20% off when you use code DRMEG. That's a total of 45% off. So head on over to boogiebuster.com. That's BOOGIE Buster.com. Get your kiddo a Boogie Buster before the sale ends, and remember to use code Dr. Meg. That's DRMEG for an additional 20% off. You know, one thing I've seen over the years working with teen girls is just how much pressure they already carry. They're thinking about how they look, how they fit in, what their friends think. And then you add a period on top of all of that, it can really shake their confidence. That's why I want to talk to you about KT by Knix. KT period underwear has completely changed the experience for so many girls. Instead of worrying about leaks at school, during sports, or at a sleepover, they can just go about their day feeling secure. And moms, you'll appreciate this. They look and feel just like regular underwear, but they're reusable and designed with different absorbency levels, so they work throughout her entire cycle. Some styles can absorb up to 9 super tampons worth, which is pretty incredible. And they even have overnight options, so everyone can sleep a little easier. What I love most is that they don't make a big deal out of it. They just quietly give girls the confidence they need. Check them out at knixteen.com and use code Dr. Meg for 15% off.
on today's episode of Parenting Great Kids.
The biggest conflict is really a personality discussion. It's very, very basic. It's just we don't understand how that other person is wired.
Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. Here's your host, Dr. Meg Meeker.
Conflict is a part of every family, but how we handle it can either divide or strengthen us. Joining us today is Bill High. He's the founder of Legacy Stone and creator of the Family Conflict Blueprint, a biblically based curriculum designed to help families resolve conflict with grace, wisdom, and practical action. Bill, welcome to Parenting Great Kids.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. I love what you do. As we were talking before we came on, it's hard because working with families in conflict is tough, but it's extremely important in our culture when everything's working against families. They're dividing things in our culture, dividing families, and our culture supports the division of families and living in different places. So the work that you're doing is extremely important. Let's dive into family conflict. We know from personal experience that unresolved family conflict is a huge source of stress, and it disconnects us. What are the biggest conflicts that families have today?
Yeah, the underlying issue is, number one, they just have a wrong perspective of conflict. So as you appreciate, the number one conflict style among families is avoidance. So they'll avoid it, or the other style that they tend to have is they have a blow up and then they ignore it. And just that recognition of saying, hey, we don't really have conflict, we avoid it, that's the biggest mistake, because it's those kind of ongoing systemic issues that are going to kill you as a family. So that's really what we see as the first and biggest mistake, is to recognize that conflict is just a reality, because we're a broken people. And when you recognize that you can actually get to the bigger purpose of what conflict's really for.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that's hard, because I'm one of those avoiders. And I think my husband's an avoider, but we've been married 44 years. So we've thrown up our hands and go, oh, forget it. We're just going to love each other. But it's hard. And I don't know if modern therapy or psychotherapy probably has an influence on the way people think. I think it does, particularly with younger people who feel, I've had conflict with this person. We are different people. We don't love each other anymore. It's time to get out. And so conflict can actually, be a tool by which couples use to sort of say, okay, we're done here. Do you find that's true?
No question. I think if we say, hey, what's the big purpose around conflict? God gives us conflict as a means to work on ourselves. But ultimately, when we model conflict well, we model this idea of redemption and restoration. So if you and I had a conflict and we work through something and we get to the end of it and we say, hey, are you good? And you're like, I'm good. And you forgive me, I forgive you. And then the rest of the world looks at it and says, wow, you guys are so weird. You just handled that really well. Yeah. And that's a model of what the gospel is. That's this idea of redemption and restoration. So when we do it well, the rest of the world says, I wonder why there's something different about you. But to your point, what's happened in our hyper-individualistic culture, we've arrived at a place where instead of seeking redemption and restoration, it's like you do something that I don't like, and then I say, well, I'm going to draw a boundary. And then we just don't talk, and we even separate. And one of the really troubling things in our world today, I'm not sure if you've seen the statistic. I think it's Cornell University that did a study that said that as much as 25% of kids today are alienated from their parents. And that alienation is oftentimes just built around this idea of, hey, mom and dad, you made some mistakes when you parented me. And so I'm going to draw a boundary and I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to see you. And that's not how you handle relationships. If I have a problem with you, man, I've got to lean in and say, let's try to work through that.
You're absolutely right. And my own experience, and I've listened, I'm sort of a professional listener as a pediatrician of kids and their parents for decades. But it seems to me you have to have a reason to want to resolve conflict. And I think that younger people are taught, okay, if we can do it, great. But if we don't do it, well, what can I do? And I believe that from a biblical perspective, we are called to enter into the mucky areas of our lives, as hard as they are, and resolve those conflicts, particularly married couples. And I know that that's pretty hard, but you're talking about resolving conflict between parents and kids too, right?
No question. The big perspective, we were talking about this a little bit before we started this, but what a lot of people don't realize is that there's really two family types, if you will. One is what is called the collective family type, and that is this idea that family is a team. So they're collective family societies around the world. You go to the Asian world, you go to Latin American world, and it's that, hey, family's the team, it's the goal, and I'm putting my hands together and literally, this is what family teams look like. We work together. It's the family identity that's most important. It is, how do we achieve together? But if you notice this perspective, a family team, there's a lot of friction when those fingers come together. But if the team continues to fight together, it advances together. And that's God's original design, is that families, a team, would advance together. What's happened, though, particularly as you get into late industrialization stage, as nations prosper, you get to the place where we don't need the team because I'm going to go off and be my own thing. And that's where we're at today in the world. We have so much of this individualistic culture. And so we don't need the team. I don't want the friction. It's easier to do this. But the problem is that if you just want to stand on your own, if you want to be independent, you're going to be alone. And that's why we're seeing birth rates decline. That's I heard a statistic. I've not gone back and checked it, but with average family size declining, the family size up ahead in the coming decades, you know what it's going to be? It's like 1.1. I mean, think about that. That's you and your dog, and maybe somebody will have a kid.
Yeah, and family blessing, the blessing that comes from those relationships, is really unmatched. We have a relationship with the Lord, then we have a relationship with our spouse, and then our family. So if you don't have that, I'm sorry, a dog doesn't replace a kid. And I just heard that on TV the other day, and I rolled my eyes at my husband. But it feels to me, and this is what I see. I went to a college in New England back in the 70s, and we were taught just the beginning then that, going off and doing your own thing, being very different from your parents is a good thing. So separate and go. But I think that today the message kids get is much more intense. You not only want to separate from your family, as you mentioned, your family really messed you up. So you need to go in a different direction. You need to identify the bad things they've done to you, and you need to go off on your own, whether you are lonely or not. And I think that's from what I see, because I see kids for first year of college, it's devastating. On the other hand, I think that teaching the family and kids early on that they are a team, an inseparable team, and this is how a team works. We all have screen-free time. We all speak the same way to one another. So don't you feel that, and if you don't agree, that's fine, but don't you feel that teaching kids that the family unit has to function as a team needs to be taught?
That's the fundamental view of our ministry, is that we must reset this theology of family. Our goal is not to, this Western view of family is raise your kids up in a nest And for
Mhm.
18 years, love them, protect them, try to give them all the best things. And then at 18, kick them out so they can go be
Mhm.
independent. And then I can retire and play golf. That's what's happened in our Western world. But to your point, Dr. Meg, it's this place that what God intended is for us to be a team, because the family's the first institution that
Mhm.
God established, first human institution. The church is the family's the microcosm of the church. And so you've got
Mhm.
all these passages about, hey, the hand needs the foot and the foot needs the leg and all this kind of stuff. We don't function if we're not interdependent. And so that's the
Mhm.
big fight that I see that we're in our world, because this sense of isolation, this sense of anxiety is only going to increase. And the truth
Yeah.
is, in God's grand design, we're part of a single narrative, an ongoing story that God has been evolving over time. We're not the story. We just fit within the story. We're part
Yeah.
of it, and that story connects us to individuals, our family members, our spouse, our kids. And so we elevate, of course, it's not just the marriage, it is the family. And so how do
Mhm.
we operate as a family? That's the big thing that I think that we're fighting for right now. And unfortunately, then, if you kind of drill it down into this space about conflict, to your point, we've reached this place where it's just easier to say, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go
Mhm.
off and do my thing. I've got a book on my bookshelf that's called The Rules of Estrangement. And they
Mhm.
talk about how this estrangement issue is rising in families. And fundamentally, it's because I don't want to have to do the hard work.
Right. Right. And they're encouraged by everybody around them, maybe even their church. It's okay. You have a right to feel what you feel. Of course they do. But it doesn't really give you the right to be cruel to another person. A lot of what I do and a lot of what I do now stems from my experience of talking to parents about the pain that kids have when they don't feel they belong, they don't have a unique position in the family, that they don't have to abide by family rules in a good way, and from an adult can probably handle that better than a kid, but a kid who's 10 or 5 or 18, if you don't teach them how critically important they are to that family unit, they're lost. And it's hard for me to get through to parents how lost those kids are. But if we reconnected some of those wires, anxiety in kids would go down, depression in kids would go down, divorce would probably go down. But let's go on to you. Let's talk about some of the very specific tools that you have, because this is your heart. Um, some tools or exercises that you use in your curriculum that parents can use right away. Let's say you have a 20-year-old kid and they're angry at the parent because the parent never did anything right, and so on and so forth. And so they have these blow up fights, every couple of months. They come in to see you, and then what?
Yeah, so one of the things that we encourage parents to do first is take a step back and say, what's God's vision for our family? And clearly define your vision, mission, and values as a family, because those become the guardrails by which a family can operate. There's a great writer out there, a guy named James Hughes. He's written a book called Family Wealth. And he
Mhm.
asks the question, and of course, he defines wealth more than money. It's intellectual, social, spiritual, emotional, and financial capital. But he says, is it possible for a family's wealth to last for 100 years?
Mhm.
For generations, if a generation is 25 years. And he says, definitively, yes. So your family can make it 100 years. What's the first thing that you have to do, though, is you have to define your family's vision, mission, values. You have to look at the long term, and then you have to say, what are the values by which we operate? Because if a parent can come in and give that set of values to kids, particularly when they're young, then you've got guardrails by which to operate. Now, let's
Mhm.
fast forward a bit and say, what's a big next step? The families that are going to make it for that 100 years are also going to have a code of conduct. The code of conduct is simply what are the rules of behavior. Now, in the business world, you'll see these books out there, Courageous Conversations and the like. But these are biblical ideas. Again, Jesus was very process oriented at times. We don't recognize some of that process orientation, but there are rules of behavior that you want to have inside of a family. Some of you can pull out of the Old Testament, but some of those rules would be what? Don't gossip. Don't triangulate. If I got a problem with you, I don't go to your husband and say, do you know what she said to me? I go to you. That's what Jesus talked about. Go first, direct. If that doesn't work, then bring a couple people with you. And if that doesn't work, then go to the church. But these basic rules of behavior, we've seen one of the most powerful things that a family can have. What's one of the other rules that we'll often see a family establish? Well, don't be harsh. It's your tone of voice. You know these rules, of course. Tone of voice is often far more important than the actual words used. Philippians 2, Jesus lowered himself. I say this oftentimes to men, by the way, who are big guys, like lower yourself, humble yourself, lower your tone of voice. So if a family can come up with those 5 to 12 rules of behavior by which they operate, then we can say, hey, we all agree. This is the way that we're supposed to operate. So that's one of the simple things that we can say. And that doesn't take a lot of time to scratch out. Now, ideally, of course, what you'd have everybody do is you'd co-create that and you'd work on it together and then you'd sign it. And you'd actually say, boy, if we're going to have a family meeting, here's the rules of behavior by which we're going to operate.
Do you think kids should weigh in on that?
Absolutely. Now, of course, the reason why we've developed the curriculum that we have, it's designed to be used in a church small group. We just realized that we've got to get to families earlier. I started out in this space on the consulting side, and I would come into families and family businesses. And of course, sometimes these families, they had adult kids, and it's a lot more work, as you know, to come in and work with a family with adult kids. So our real aim is to work with these young families, pre-marrieds, so that as they go into this, our best example is a young family that started with us. They weren't engaged. They went through our course, they got engaged, and then as they got married, they'd established family vision, mission, values, code of conduct. And the truth is, they argue better. And they know when they get a little bit wonky, and they say, hey, how are you doing living out that value? And because they've agreed to it, it's very humbling.
Ooh, I mean, if my husband came home and said, how are you doing living out that value? I'd probably run in the other room. No, but it's, you're right. I mean, it's an accountability thing, which I think it is adult probably gets easier as you get older because you practice it. What do you do with the child who's raised with biblical Christian values, raised with this idea that the family is the team? And then they go off to college and they come home and tell you at age 20 that you really don't know what you're talking about. What do you do?
Yeah, that is the proverbial putting the toothpaste back in the tube. And so the number one thing oftentimes that we say that mom and dad have to do first is many cases we see those families need to backtrack to, hey, what's our vision again? What's our mission? What are our values? And if you haven't written that down, go back and write it down, be clear about it. So sometimes it's just the parents have to get this down on paper. They have to work on code of conduct. They have to, we haven't talked about this yet, but it's what's our conflict process? Because in many cases, they can model that with that child of theirs. To the big word, then 2 big words is to create curiosity. So that child can say, you're doing this differently now. I wonder why that is. And we just believe that if you keep working at it like that, that curiosity will cause them to return.
You know, that's a great trick that I have found that works with, not a trick, but teenagers, rebellious 13-year-old or 14-year-old. rather than going in and just sort of hammering them what they should believe and what you believe. And I mean, of course, teaching is very important, but to teach by asking questions and listen. Because I think whether there's a son or daughter's 13 or 23 or 33, they want to know that you really care about what they're thinking and feeling. You don't have to agree with it, but you need to at least want to hear that. So what are the most common conflict challenges that you see in families? Is it between the parents disagreeing with the kids, or the kids, walking away from the parents, or the marriages? Because I mean, that's a big issue too. What are the main, what group of people have the highest rate of conflict, do you think?
I don't know that there's one group of people that has the highest rate of conflict. I do know that if there's an underlying family business, that is going to be one of the things that's going to create a lot of conflict, because of the fact that I'm not just mom or dad, I'm CEO, I'm
Mm,
boss. So I'm CEO to all these people. I'm the boss to you. Even worse, if I'm having to make decisions about your career and about your pay. So many cases, we encourage family businesses to put in place an employment committee and make sure there's a buffer between parent and child. But one of the biggest things in addition to that, Dr. Meg, is that we see the biggest conflict is really a personality
oh.
discussion. It's
Hmm.
so it's very, very basic. It's just we don't understand how that other person is wired. In my
Hmm.
own marriage, my wife is total opposite of me. She's
Hmm.
steady, consistent, a little bit of an introvert, but she's a nice, easygoing kind of person. Well, I'm a fast-paced, visionary multitasker, you
That's
know.
right. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
until we did a personality profile, I could not figure her out, and sometimes it'd make me mad and it'd make her
Hmm.
frustrated. But we do that with our children too. Is that the worst question we say about personality is to say, why can't you be like this? Why
Right.
can't you be like me? And I've seen it time and time again where parents do not understand their children. And that's a key word. It's that Proverbs 24 verse that says, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it's established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. You can't fill the house unless you create understanding. And that
Right.
first bit of understanding is personality. And
Right.
personality, as you know, doesn't change. It's God's hard wiring. God gives it
Mhm.
to us so we can rub up against each other and learn from one another. So that's one of the most basic ones that I see.
You know, I love that, because I think a lot of times when you have that personality conflict, people don't recognize it's a personality conflict. I saw my daughter and her daughter arguing this weekend, and I stopped them. I said, "You guys are exactly alike," and they are. They're both firstborn girls, both very stubborn, and I could see them. And just to say, "Oh, this is who I am." But I think one of the biggest difficulties that I've seen in personality differences is that they each misunderstand motive. So if you have somebody, your wife is quiet and she's home and she's got a husband who's running around and doing all these things, she might think you're doing this because you really don't want to be with me. Well, it has nothing to do with that. I mean, I'm sure that's not true in your family, but so many times we ascribe malintent to a person when it's just their personality. They're just kind of not paying attention or whatever. They're not willfully trying to harm you. So do you help parents and kids sort of work that out through when you talk about the personality
We
differences?
do. So, as you appreciate, many times that visionary leader, see, there's different personality assessments, of course, that you can use, but you just use that great example. So, if you're working, for instance, with a business executive, maybe they are that futuristic visionary and they have so many things running around in their mind. They're literally sitting at the dinner table with you, and you can tell they're not there. They're not fully
Right. Right.
present.
Hmm.
It's not that they're bad, they just are, their mind's still worrying. And so you literally have to say, and this is my wife speaking this to me, she has to say, hey, are you fully here? Are you present?
Mhm.
And then I can kind of step out of that mindset and be fully present. The flip side is it begins to change the questions that I ask her. I used to ask the questions I would ask myself. What are you dreaming about? What are you thinking about? Well, my wife is not a futuristic visionary, and she would
Mhm.
freeze like a deer in the headlights. And so I had to learn to ask a different question. What are you processing? How are you thinking about this? Or can you take some time to think about this? Because I'd want an immediate answer. And we do the exact same thing with our kids. We just did this, by the way, with our grandkids, and we had them did a little personality assessment. Well, sure enough, there's one of the grandkids. She's almost 7, and she's a lion. She's a
Yeah.
leader, and she'll get
Mhm.
out there. But one of the other kids is very much just a beaver. She's content to read books and be quiet. And that those are going to be some of these ongoing things that they'll have to learn if they're going to continue to be a team as a family.
I think it's so important for parents to understand as well that a child perceives your personality in the same way as a spouse, but it's magnified. For instance, a child walks in the room, or the child sitting at the table, maybe doing homework, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, doing their homework. Dad walks in the door, texting on his phone, walks right past the kid, goes upstairs and changes. And I say to parents, you think that's not a big deal, but let me tell you how your child feels. Your child feels invisible. And if your child feels invisible, she is convinced that she's not important to you. Let's rewrite the scenario. And again, I think this is such a simple change. A lot of these are very simple changes. You walk through the door, you put your phone in your pocket, you stop, you look at her in the eye, you say hello, you give her a kiss on the top of the head. It's great to see you. And then you go up and change. 60 seconds makes a huge difference to a kid. So if as an adult, you experience, discomfort or feeling invisible, it's magnified to a kid. So I'm hearing from you that a lot of the changes that people make, spouse to spouse, mom to child, are not huge. I mean, you know what I mean? Or are they bigger than I'm seeing or
No,
hearing here?
it's really about having a system. So
Hmm.
one of the things that we like to teach about is if you think about Abraham in the Bible with his wife Sarah, they have one child who's the promised child. They have one not so much, and we could get off into the Ishmael side of
Yeah.
things, but we won't. But that's a lot easier to manage. 3 people, okay? But when they go down to Egypt, they're down there for 400 years and they come back, there's 1 million people.
Hmm.
And that's the point in time that the law is given. And the law is given as a way to govern the family and to still keep the family together. It's a lot different to govern 1 million people than it is to govern a handful of people. And so the 10 Commandments is, if you will, a code of conduct. Okay,
Hmm.
love God, love people. Here's a certain way by which we do it. And what does it also tell us to do? It's got all these celebrations. Let's remind ourselves, let's tell the story of what God has done. So the 10 Commandments, the law, is really about a process on how we should interact. And so if you think about it that way, it becomes way easier to govern the family. One of the things, by the way, that you'll see repeatedly throughout the Old Testament is this concept of remembering. Remember,
Mm.
do not forget. And that is
Right.
God's way in the context of conflict. The best thing that I can do is not immediately listen to respond. Hey, you said this, so I'm going to say this. The best thing that I can do is to mirror the other person's response. And I'm sure you've heard this whole idea that if I repeat back what I just heard, comprehension and understanding go way up from that other person, because they know that I didn't try to reinterpret, I didn't try to twist it my way. Instead, I actually heard what they said. And that's one of the simplest things that a parent can do, we can do inside of our families, is really spending that time to mirror back what we just heard, so that people are saying, hey, they're listening to understand and not just listening to respond.
Yeah. Or to tell them what to do. How do parents, single parents, help their kids become part of a team when they don't have a spouse and they're exhausted and they're working hard to pay the bills and they don't get to spend that much time with their kids? Is it okay for them to bring their kids in and say, we're a team, I need help, and here's how I need your help? Or should single parents just sort of say, I'll forge ahead on my own, just I hope everything goes well? How do you advise single parents?
So at a minimum, we encourage single parents to do just like a married couple would be, and say, at a minimum, here's our values.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those values would be family's a team. The greatest single parent story in the Bible, if you will, is Tamar.
Yeah.
Judah, Tamar. And what we know about her family line is that they were marked by integrity, because her I think it's her great grandsons end up becoming pillars in Bethlehem. Boaz comes out of that line. He's a man of standing, and it keeps going on. Of course, it goes into Jesse, it goes into David, and on and on. There are 468 sons of Perez who are at the rebuilding of the wall in the book of Nehemiah, and they're described as men of valor. And so, yes, for single parents, if you at least come together and say, we're a team, and that team may look a little bit differently, but God can redeem and restore and set this on a course that generationally is powerful.
And knowing that is power. Knowing that God is with you and God is directing you and God is giving you the strength and the direction and the wisdom to do it, you can do it. And that's what I love about your work. My guest has been Bill High. He is the founder of Legacy Stone, and he's the creator of Family Conflict Blueprint. It's a biblically based curriculum designed to help parents and families resolve conflict. Bill, how can our listeners find you, find your work, and learn about what you're doing?
Yep. If they go to legacystone.com, they'll see that we have this curriculum available. They can order it individually. They can do it in a small group kind of context. They can do it as an on-demand offering. Of course, we have other offerings as well, but that'd be my encouragement to them. The process is pretty simple, but once you have that process in place and begin to apply it, it really can change those relationships and those conversations.
And that's what we all want. We began the conversation about avoidance and how easy avoidance is, because it sort of fuels our anger. I'm right, he's wrong, I have a right to be angry, but where does it take you? It just takes you into misery. So I think that the work that you're doing is critically important for families. Bill, thank you so much for coming. This has just been really, really fun and very enlightening.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me on.
I stopped Googling parenting advice when I found this. Dr. Meg Meeker's PGK Insider community is where real parenting help lives.
There's a reason so many parents trust Dr. Meg Meeker. Now her courses, parenting forum, and trusted answers are all in one place, the PGK Insider community. Join free at meekerparenting.com. Real answers from a pediatrician who gets it.